Your last reader is Lyndsay Faye. Lyndsay Faye is the author of The Gods of Gotham, which was listed as one of Publishers Weekly's best mysteries of 2012. She also wrote a Sherlock Holmes pastiche called Dust and Shadow, which I am a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and it was one of the best Sherlock Holmes pastiches I've ever read. It's fantastic. Lyndsay has been published in Best American Mystery Stories, The Burning Maiden, Sherlock Holmes in America, The Strand Magazine, and she's also written for Tor.com about the Baker Street Irregulars. She's a member of the Baker Street Irregulars, and if you know anything about Sherlock Holmes, you know that's an invite-only situation. And Sir Isaac Asimov, oh, not Sir Isaac Asimov, he wasn't knighted. Isaac Asimov was a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. She's also a member of the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes, as well as the Baker Street Babes. And she is a fantastic writer and a fantastic person. So help me welcome Lyndsay Faye.
Thank you so much for staying, everyone. Oh my God, this bookstore is amazing, right? Woo! Right? Okay. Amazing, amazing bookstore. I'm gonna put all my belongings on the ground. So, tonight, I was just delighted to be asked to be here because brick and mortar stores, they're closing down like gangbusters, and this is just a place where people want to hang out and they want to sip wine with each other, and they want to palaver about sci-fi and mystery, and it's brilliant. So I'm going to read one of my favorite stories. Obviously, knowing my background, it's going to be a Sherlock Holmes mystery. So I'm going to read a very abridged version of The Adventure of Blue Carbuncle. It's extremely lengthy, but it's also magical, and so I encourage anyone who's listening to me, if you remotely like any bit of it, if you want to go home and read it, it is completely public domain, so you can find it anywhere on the interwebs. And just to not break things, I'm going to try to do it with accents. Do you want accents? Do you want accents? Or do you want no accents? With accents? Okay. No accents? Okay. All accents. Okay. So I'm just going to set the scene for a second. Watson, he visits Holmes during the Christmas season, and he finds Holmes just sitting on his sofa, and Holmes is riveted by this old-ass hat that he's hung from a chair. And Holmes is sitting on a sofa going, this hat. Watson is not shocked by any of this because Holmes is not a dude, and Watson knows from Holmes. Holmes is a completely odd man. So Holmes reports that a stranger, specifically Henry Baker, as we'll find out soon, has been set upon by roughs, and then he lost his hat, he lost his holiday goose. All of these events are terrible. And then their friend Peterson, the commissionaire from downstairs, picked them up, and then Holmes explains, and I will now jump into the live-action version. He brought round both hat and goose to me on Christmas, knowing that even the smallest problems were of interest to me. The goose we retained until this morning, when there were signs that, in spite of the slight frost, it would be well that it should be eaten without unnecessary delay. Its finder has carried it off, therefore, to fulfill the ultimate destiny of a goose, while I continue to retain the hat of the unknown gentleman who lost his Christmas dinner. Did he not advertise? No. Then what clue could you have as to his identity? Only as much as we can deduce. From his hat. Precisely. But you are joking. What can you gather from this old battered felt? Here's my lens. You know my methods. What can you gather yourself as to the individuality of the man who has worn this article? I took the tattered object in my hands and turned it over rather ruefully. It was a very ordinary black hat of the usual round shape, hard, and much the worse for wear. The lining had been of red silk, but was a good deal discolored. There was no maker's name, but, as Holmes had remarked, the initials HB were scrawled upon one side. It was pierced in the brim for a hat securer, but the elastic was missing. For the rest, it was cracked, exceedingly dusty, and spotted in several places. "I can see nothing," said I, handing it back to my friend. "On the contrary, Watson, you can see everything. You fail, however, to reason from what you see. You are too timid in drawing your inferences." "Then, pray tell me what it is that you can infer from this hat." He picked it up and gazed at it in the peculiar introspective fashion which was characteristic of him. "It is, perhaps, less suggestive than it might have been," he remarked. "That the man was highly intellectual is, of course, obvious upon the face of it, and also that he was fairly well-to-do within the last 3 years, although he has now fallen upon evil days. He had foresight, but has less now than formerly, pointing to a moral retrogression, which, when taken with the decline of his fortune, seems to indicate some evil influence, probably drink, at work upon him. This may also account for the obvious fact that his wife has ceased to love him. My dear Holmes, he has, however, retained some degree of self-respect," he continued, disregarding my remonstrance. "He is a man who leads a sedentary life, is middle-aged, has grizzled hair, which he has cut within the last few days, and which he anoints with lime cream. These are the more patent facts which are to be deduced from his hat. Also, by the way, it is extremely improbable that he has gas laid on in his house." "You are certainly joking, Holmes." "Not in the least. Is it possible that even now, when I give you these results, you are unable to see how they're attained?" "I have no doubt that I am very stupid, but I must confess that I am unable to follow you. For example, how did you deduce that this man was intellectual?" For answer, Holmes clapped the hat upon his head. It came right over the forehead and settled upon the bridge of his nose. "It is a question of cubic capacity. A man with so large a brain must have something in it." "The decline of his fortunes, then. This hat is 3 years old. These flat brims, curled at the edge, came in then. It is a hat of the very best quality. Look at the band of ribbed silk and the excellent lining. If this man could afford to buy so expensive a hat 3 years ago, and has had no hat since, then he has assuredly gone down in the world." "Well, that is clear enough." "Certainly. But how about the foresight and the moral retrogression?" Sherlock Holmes laughed. "Here is the foresight," said he, putting his finger upon the little disc and loop of the hat securer. "They are never sold upon hats. If this man ordered one, it is a sign of a certain amount of foresight, since he went out of his way to take this precaution against the wind. But since we see that he has broken the elastic and has not troubled to replace it, it is obvious that he has less foresight now than formerly, which is a distinct proof of a weakening nature." "Your reasoning is certainly plausible." "The further points, that he is middle-aged, that his hair is grizzled, that it has been recently cut, and that he uses lime cream, are all to be gathered from a close examination of the lower part of the lining. The lens discloses a large number of hair ends, clean cut by the scissors of the barber. They all appear to be adhesive, and there's this distinct odor of lime cream. This dust, you will observe, is not the gritty gray dust of the street, but the fluffy brown dust of the house, showing that it has been hung up indoors most of the time, while the marks of moisture upon the inside are proof positive that the wearer perspired very freely and could therefore hardly have been in the best of training." "But his wife! You said she had ceased to love him." "This hat has not been brushed for weeks. When I see you, my dear Watson, with a week's accumulation of dust upon your hat, and when your wife allows you to go out in such a state, I shall fear that you have been unfortunate enough to lose your wife's affection." "But he might be a bachelor." "Nay, he was bringing home the goose as a peace offering to his wife. Remember the card upon the bird's leg." "But how on earth do you deduce that gas is not laid on in the house?" "One tallow stain, even 2, might come by chance. But when I see no less than 5, I think there can be little doubt that the individual must be brought into frequent contact with burning tallow. He walks upstairs at night, probably with his hat in one hand and a guttering candle in the other. Anyhow, He never got tallow stains from a gas jet. Are you satisfied? Well, it is very ingenious, said I, laughing, but all this seems to be rather a waste of energy. Sherlock Holmes had opened his mouth to reply when the door flew open and Peterson, the commissionaire, rushed into the apartment with flushed cheeks and the face of a man who is dazed with astonishment. "The goose, Mr. Holmes, the goose, sir!" he gasped. "What of it, then? Has it returned to life and flapped off through the kitchen window?" Holmes twisted himself round upon the sofa to get a fairer view of the man's excited face. "See here, sir! See what my wife found in its crop!" He held out in his hand and displayed upon the center of the palm a brilliantly scintillating blue stone, rather smaller than a bean in size, but of such purity and radiance that it twinkled like an electric point in the dark hollow of his hand. Sherlock Holmes sat up with a whistle. "By Jove, Peterson," said he, "this is treasure trove indeed. I suppose you know what you've got. A diamond, sir? A precious stone. It cuts into glass as though it were putty. It's more than a precious stone. It is the precious stone. Not the Countess of Morcar's Blue Carbuncle," I ejaculated. Scene. We're actually going to do a scene break right there because, ejaculate is the best word to end on. So, now, we're going to fast forward in time. So the Blue Carbuncle found inside the goose was stolen from the Countess of Morcar at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, right? And Holmes has been detecting all this time. Watson's been Watsoning, and they've traced the bird, finally, at last, because obviously the stone ended up in the bird, so they have to trace the bird. So they figure out that another man very interested in the identical goose is questioning the vendor, and Holmes and Watson seize the moment and accost him. Well, they do. "Who are you, then? What do you want?" he asked in a quavering voice. "You will excuse me," said Holmes blandly. "I think that I could be of assistance to you." "You? Who are you? How could you know anything of the matter?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know. But you can know nothing of this." "Excuse me, I know everything of it. You were endeavoring to trace some geese which were sold by Mrs. Oakshott of Brixton Road to a salesman named Breckenridge, by him in turn to Mr. Windigate of the Alpha, and by him to his club, of which Mr. Henry Baker is a member." "Oh, sir, you are the very man whom I have longed to meet," cried the little fellow with outstretched hands and quivering fingers. Sherlock Holmes hailed a four-wheeler which was passing. "In that case, we had better discuss it in a cozy room rather than this windswept marketplace," said he. "But pray tell me, before we go farther, who it is that I have the pleasure of assisting?" The man hesitated for an instant. "My name is John Robinson," he answered with a sidelong glance. No. "The real name," said Holmes sweetly. "It is always awkward doing business with an alias." A flush sprang to the white cheeks of the stranger. "Well then," said he, "my real name is James Ryder." "Precisely so. Head attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. Pray step into the cab, and I shall soon be able to tell you everything which you would wish to know." The little man stood glancing from one to the other of us with half-frightened, half-hopeful eyes, as one who is not sure whether he is on the verge of a windfall or of a catastrophe. Then he stepped into the cab, and in half an hour we were back in our sitting room at Baker Street. "Here we are," said Holmes cheerily, as we filed into the room. "I will just put on my slippers before we settle this little matter of yours. Now then, you want to know what became of those geese?" "Yes, sir." "It was one bird, I imagine, in which you were interested. White, with a black bar across the tail." Ryder quivered with emotion. "Oh, sir," he cried, "can you tell me where it went to?" "It came here." "Here?" "Yes, and a most remarkable bird it proved. I don't wonder that you should take an interest in it. It laid an egg after it was dead. The balmiest, brightest little blue egg that ever was seen. I have it here in my museum. Our visitor staggered to his feet and clutched the mantelpiece with his right hand. Holmes unlocked his strongbox and held up the Blue Carbuncle, which shone out like a star, with a cold, brilliant, many-pointed brilliance. Ryder stood glaring with a drawn face, uncertain whether to claim or disown it. "The game's up, Ryder," said Holmes quietly. "Hold up, man, or you'll be into the fire. Give him an arm back to his chair, Watson. He's not got blood enough in him to go for felony with impunity. Give him a dash of brandy. So, now he looks a little more human. What a shrimp it is, to be sure." For a moment he had staggered and nearly fallen, but the brandy brought a tinge of color into his cheeks, and he sat staring with frightened eyes at his accuser. "I have almost everything in my hands, and all the proofs which I could possibly need, so there's little which you need tell me. You had heard, Ryder, of this blue stone of the Countess of Morcar's." "It was Catherine Cusack who told me of it," said he, in a crackling voice. "You knew that this man Horner, the plumber, had been concerned in some such matter before, and that suspicion would rest more readily upon him. What did you do then? You made some small job in my lady's room, you and your confederate Cusack, and you managed that he should be the man sent for. Then, when he had left, you rifled the jewel case, raised the alarm, and had this unfortunate man arrested. You then..." Ryder threw himself down suddenly upon the rug and clutched at my companion's knees. "For God's sake, have mercy!" he shrieked. "Think of my father, of my mother, who would break their hearts. Oh, don't bring me into court, for Christ's sake, don't! Get back into your chair," said Holmes sternly. "It is very well to cringe and crawl now, but you thought little enough of this poor Horner in the dock for a crime of which he knew nothing. Tell us the truth, for there lies your only hope of safety." Ryder passed his tongue over his parched lips. "I went out as if on some commission I made for my sister's house. All the way there, every man I met seemed to me to be a policeman or a detective, and for all that it was a cold night, the sweat was pouring down my face before I came to Brixton Road. My sister asked me what was the matter and why I was so pale, but I told her that I had been upset by the jewel robbery at the hotel. Then I went into the backyard and smoked a pipe and wondered what it would be best to do. I was leaning against the wall at the time, looking at the geese which were waddling about my feet, and suddenly an idea came into my head, which showed me how I could beat the best detective that ever lived. My sister had told me some weeks before that I might have the pick of her geese for a Christmas present, and I knew that she was always as good as her word. I would take my goose now, and in it I would carry my stone to Kilburn. There was a little shed in the yard, and behind this I drove one of the birds. I caught it, and prying its bill open, I thrust the stone down its throat as far as my finger could reach, but the creature flapped and struggled, and out came my sister to know what was the matter. And I turned to speak to her, and the brute broke loose and fluttered off among the others. "Whatever were you doing with that bird, Jem?" said she. "Well," said I, "you said you'd give me one for Christmas, and I was feeling which was the fattest." "Oh," said she, "we set yours aside for you. Jem's bird, we call it." "Never mind, I'll have the other and I'll take it now," said I. "Oh, just as you like," said she, a little huffed. "What is it you want then?" "That white one with the barred tail, right in the middle of the flock." "Oh, very well, kill it. Take it with you." Well, I did what she said, Mr. Holmes, and I carried the bird all the way to Kilburn. I told my pal what I had done, for he was a man that it was easy to tell a thing like that to. He laughed until he choked. We got a knife and opened the goose. My heart turned to water, but there was no sign of the stone, and I knew that some terrible mistake had occurred. I left the bird, rushed back to my sister's, and hurried into the backyard. There was not a bird to be seen there. "Where are they, Maggie?" I cried. "Well, gone to the dealer's, Jem." "But was there another one with a barred tail?" I asked, "the same as the one I chose?" "Yes." "Jem, there were two barred-tailed ones, and I could never tell them apart." Well, And of course I saw it all, and I ran off as hard as my feet would carry me to this man Breckenridge, but he had sold the lot at once, and not one word would he tell me as to where they had gone. My sister thinks I'm going mad. Sometimes I think that I am myself, and now I am myself a branded thief without ever having touched the wealth for which I sold my character. God help me! God help me! He burst into convulsive sobbing with his face buried in his hands. There was a long silence, broken only by his heavy breathing and by the measured tapping of Sherlock Holmes' fingertips upon the edge of the table. Then my friend rose and threw open the door. "Get out," said "What? Oh, heavens bless you! No more words. Get out." And no more words were needed. There was a rush, a clatter upon the stairs, the bang of a door, and the crisp rattle of running footfalls from the street. "After all, Watson," said Holmes, reaching up his hand for his clay pipe, "I'm not retained by the police to supply their deficiencies. If Horner were in danger, it would be another matter, but this fellow would not appear against him, and the case must collapse. I suppose I am commuting a felony, but it is just possible that I am saving a soul. This fellow will not go wrong again. He's too terribly frightened. Send him to jail now, and you make him a jailbird for life. Besides, it is the season of forgiveness. Chance has put in our way a most singular and whimsical problem, and its solution is its own reward. If you will have the goodness to touch the bell, Doctor, we will begin another investigation in which also a bird will be the chief